Thank you very much for this invitation. Some preliminary issues I want to discuss. First, understanding the freedom of the free market economy as a free interaction between supply and demand, I consider global climate change as one moderator of the effect. Although this is not an empirical study, I'm going to bring some data that proves how it works. Secondly, the country where I come from, Colombia, we lived terrible times during the 80s and 90s. So many teenagers found kind of refuge in sports and literature. I love poetry and novels. And I got inspired by basically two important authors, novelists, Ernesto Sabato from Argentina and Gabriel Garcia Marquez from Colombia. And one thing I learned from them, that sometimes the best books begin by the end. So I'm going to start with the conclusions. Then I have some preliminary insights, and I divided the presentation in three stages. Scenario 1, which relies on current data. Scenario 2, which uses data to forecast. And the third one is I have to do something. I have to present something related to this, and basically my research project, it's Gardener Connection. And then I will talk a little bit about it. So, conclusions about this. Rely, based on macroeconomics data, there's no evidence of the climate change impact, GDP. Secondly, but climate change can affect specific sectors. And third, economic growth may impact climate change. But let's start something else. For me, it's too difficult to separate the research from the teaching exercise I do. So sometimes I'm going to explain some economics terms that I know you all know, but I think it's important to recall. Economics is not just about money. It's about how we live, how our resources, the resources we have, are administered and allocated just to have a better or create a better or a worse planet to live in. And third is about who gets and why. The other thing is that economic growth is measured based on GDP performance. And GDP is the indicators that prove the health of a nation. In fact, GDP measures all the value of the goods and services provided or produced by a nation. So, scenario number 1. You already brought this image here because global warming is maybe the most visible, because we all can feel it, indicator of climate change. And in the last decade, since 2010, we have had the 10 warmest years on record, being the last year, 2022, the 6th warmest on the record. There are more controlling subjects, I call them, of the global economy. The thing is that, the recent one, I'm talking about the recent one because previously, we have the financial crisis, we have the oil crisis. In 2008, we have a financial crisis. But COVID-19 and geostrategy, the worst. also affect the growth of a nation, of the global growth. And this is basically because they happen out of the blue. Nobody expects them. So when they enter our lives, they affect us immediately. And then that's why we can see this. We can see this. But and now we see that after COVID, the economy, the global economy was recovering, but now something happened here, and it's the war. So all these things, when these things happen, they affect immediately the economic growth. The problem with the climate change is that it is like having a hippopotamus in a living room. As long as we have space to walk, we don't care about it. And that is a problem with the climate change. It's still giving us space to adapt and having a normal life. Then, two variables I want to see regarding the GDP that are directly related to climate change. The oil rents have dramatically decreased, but here is what happened with the COVID, but again, it's increasing. And the second one is the coal rents. And why I call this important, because we are also talking about carbon dioxide emissions. So the rent, again, the coal rents were decreased, but now, because of the war, countries are starting to use it, using it again. But there's some hope, and this is the hope, that renewable electric sources are increasing. But we can see that, in fact, the demand for energy is increasing globally. But also, the renewable sources are increasing. And that's a hope, because somehow we are moving to a new technology to get new energy generation sources. So, for instance, hydropower, wind energy, solar energy, bioenergy, geothermal energy, and off-grid electricity, all of them are increasing. And, some like this, that is almost more than 100% of the total increase of this one that is just getting some megawatts. But anyway, that's important because that's a way to prove how these old energies, fossil energies, can be replaced and how nations are working on this. And you were talking about natural disasters, and this disaster and the hazards we have, and the natural disasters have accumulated total losses around 223,000 billion in 2002. Those are the current data we have. Now, let's move to the second scenario. The second scenario has to be with simulations and forecasts. So I'm going to mention 3 reports that for me are great, and it just helps us to understand, to have a better panorama of what is happening or what will happen in the future. The first one is the Stern Review report, which I consider a great report since was for me the first one that was taken seriously from any government. It was sponsored by the British government, and it was the Dr. Stern team who worked on this. And 3 conclusions related to economics I brought here. The first one is that climate change is an externality. Externality he said that is the greatest market failure. Just to know what an externality is that effect by an individual that impacts the well-being of a bystander. If externality is positive, I mean, if it has a positive impact on human beings, it is called a positive externality. And that's why he should receive a compensation for it. But if not, on the other hand, if the effect is negative, it's a negative externality, so he should pay for it. The problem with the market failure is that nobody is receiving anything, nobody's paying anything for that damage. Secondly, according to him, global GDP could decline by 5 to 20% by the end of the century. And something nice he said is that efforts to decrease climate change are made, that GDP will only be impacted by 1% on yearly basis. That's the first report. The second report talks about biodiversity and ecosystem collapse. And it says that it is one of the problems human beings have to face in the next 10 years. Because 44 trillion of economic value generation relies on ecosystems and biodiversity. Also, they said that if we want to, control and to get a better impact on this, we should shift towards a nature-positive model, where 3 strategic socioeconomic systems are first, food, land, and ocean use. Secondly, infrastructure and the built environment. And finally, extractives and energy. So they said that if we could move to this scenario, then opportunities would add up to 10 trillion in annual business value and create around 400 new jobs, 400 million jobs by 2030. And the third one is lovely. This is a simulation. So these people, it's from Swiss Red Institute, these researchers gave us 4 different scenarios. The first scenario is, okay, what's going to happen if we can meet the Paris Agreement target? And it's to keep the increase of temperature below 2 degrees Celsius. Secondly, if we do further efforts, let's say that we can get the temperature up to 2 degrees Celsius. So if some mitigation actions are taken, so the temperature may increase to 2.6 degrees Celsius. And finally, if no action is taken, it's going to happen that we're going to have this severe case. The temperature by 2050 will increase 3.2 degrees Celsius. If it happens, the GDP will be, 18% of the global GDP will be swiped off, eliminated, destroyed. But the countries where more impact may have will be the African countries, Middle East African countries, and the Southeast Asian countries with this impact. So it's a very nice simulation they did. These are called numbers, and these are predictions. And it's a way to aware or to wake awareness among people. And then I said, there's something we have to do. And 1 year ago, I met, when I was back in my country, I met a couple of colleagues, doctors from the economics field too. And we discussed something about this. And 3 things we all agree. Number one, macro problems must be treated micro. We are not going to change the world, but we can improve small communities' lifestyle. Secondly, research is important in all aspects. Literature review, scientific review, it's necessary, it's mandatory, but we have to go forward. So we created a independent research action project, which we not only get data and literature review, but we are going to impact societies. And then I have to show this because also numbers from the previous scenario, and it's the food, healthy diet. At the beginning, you talk about nutrition and all this stuff. We have a big difference between food security and food sovereignty. So we're working on food sovereignty. And basically because the international poverty line, that is $1.90, if you are below that number, you're really poor. But again, with $190, people cannot afford food. Secondly, nearly 700 million people are hungry. Third, climate change has negative impacts on food production, but in reverse, agricultural practices are a real problem for climate change. It currently generates between 19 and 29% of total greenhouse gas emissions. So we started this project. We moved to the local zones, and basically Gardener Connection is a communication project in which we want to connect small-scale farmers with the community through computer-mediated communication platforms. So basically, we want to connect these people, and when we talk about small-scale farmers, you know that we talk about food sovereignty. We don't talk about food security. Because basically these people who don't own huge let's say, spots of land, they have to do this exercise for different purposes. The first purpose for them is to meet their table's demand. I mean, when I say table, their food demand. Secondly, if there's a surplus, they should share it with the community, with the other, gardeners. I have some potatoes, I have some tomatoes left. Let's switch this. Let's share it. And third, if it is still some surplus, it should be sold to the local community directly. And in that way, the jobber, that is the intermediator, will be eliminated, and in that way, food prices decrease. So we want them to teach them, we work on this, but also we want to know how they transfer knowledge. And basically, it is divided in 3 phases. First is the field work. Second phase is the design of the platforms. And then teach them how to use it. So basically, this is what I just explained. And who we are going to impact? Small-scale farmers and the local community. How? By contributing to food sovereignty, promoting ecological sustainability, stimulating good agricultural practices that involve the treatment of water and climate change and the use of pesticides, And third, to promote the consumption of local products. That's the website we have. And thank you very much.